Greetings, salutations, and welcome to Sportslook, the sports television program for the high plains of West Texas and eastern New Mexico. I'm your host, Doc Elder, and I'm all dressed up for a going-away party. Who's going away? We are, hopefully just for a semester. But on our way out, we're going to have two of our graduating seniors. We're going to have Brooklyn and Michael. We'll have two of our rising juniors. We'll have Lane and Dylan. I'll finish up with an overtime, but as always, I'll start out with an Eastern recap. Congratulations to the Greyhound baseball team. They kept alive their hopes of going to Lone Star Conference playoffs by taking 2 out of 4 from Angelo State down in San Angelo. Congratulations going out to Seeley Vick, Lindsay Adcock, and Ty Beardsworth from the rodeo squad. All 3 of those, after last weekend's rodeo in Stephenville, have qualified for the National College Finals Rodeo. And congratulations to Marcus Parker. Last week at a track meet, he ran the fastest time in the 200-meter dash in the nation this year. That has been your Eastern recap, so we'll clear the set and we'll bring in Brooklyn and Michael right now. Welcome back to Sportslook, and it makes me happy, but it makes me kind of sad to bring the next 2 guests to the set, Brooklyn Beal, Michael Pointer. I'm happy because I've watched you grow up and become the amazing young people that you are, but this is your last episode of Sportslook.
Yes, it is kind of a bittersweet moment.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's very bittersweet.
Well, Brooklyn, we've talked in the past. I assume that most people, if they've watched an episode, they probably have some idea. But just one more time, a recap. What was your reason for coming to school here at Eastern?
Volleyball. I got recruited to play volleyball from Phoenix, which is where I'm from. So.
And you became a comm major.
Yeah. Yes.
And Michael, your story?
I came here to be a filmmaker. I had that goal from the beginning, and I'm stuck through it.
Well, Michael, the last time we had you on, we were talking about filmmaking, and we were talking about the people that were influences. But as it gets closer to the end, are you thinking maybe you want to stay in television a little bit more?
Yeah. Actually, tomorrow I have an interview at KOET in Albuquerque. So at least for now, I'm going to be sticking with television, and we'll see where it goes from there.
The great American film somewhere in the future that may be put on hold a little bit.
Yeah, I guess so.
And Brooklyn, at one time we had talked to you about the fact that you were definitely going to go comm and you were going to take my job someday. And now you're actually thinking you want to educate the youth of America.
Yeah, so I'm going to go through Eastern's alternative licensure program, which I also will pursue a master's in secondary education at the same time, and hopefully get a job here at the junior high in Portales or in Clovis.
Brooklyn, when you got on the crew at Sportslook, what was it that got you on this program to begin with?
Well, we have to take a practicum, being a comm major. And so I met with Alan, and he kind of asked, while you're having your meeting, he kind of picks your brain, asks you what your interests are. And of course, mine was sports. That was my first thing. Like, I'm really into sports. And he's like, we do this show called Sportslook. You should be on it. And so he kind of interjected me into this show, and then I have been here ever since.
And Michael, same question. How did you get involved with Sportslook?
I had a job with Josh Bell and Gallagher over the summer, and he told me all about this crazy job where they get to go to, they travel to different states, different high schools, and just film football games and basketball games, and then they put it on TV, and it just seemed like where I needed to be.
Both of you, of course, were high school athletes. Brooklyn, I'll ask you this question first. How different was it playing the sport and then broadcasting it?
It's a lot more personal when you're playing the sport. So that's one thing that I think that Dylan and I did a pretty good job at doing High School Spotlight, is you want to get all the kids' names out there, all the athletes' names, because to us watching the game, it may not seem like a big deal, like, oh, it's just another high school game. But for all these high school teams, it is the highlight of their week, sometimes the highlight of the year. So I think playing it, because I got to play it, broadcasting it, it makes it a little bit more special, because I know what it feels like to put on the jersey and to go out there and play.
And Michael, I'll ask you the same question. What was your big adjustment going from seeing it on the field to having the big macro vision of it?
I think I actually had a pretty interesting perspective from it because I played for the Portales High School football team, and so one year I'm playing on the field, and the very next year I'm back on that same field, just with the camera this time, and I was right there next to my friends, and so that was kind of, it was a weird perspective, but it was like smooth transition, I think.
In the years that you've been associated with Sportslook, you've had the chance to do High School Spotlight. You've also had the chance to be involved with highlights from Eastern. What's the defining moment? What's the one thing you're going to remember the best?
I'm doing High School Spotlight. It is so different from news. And I was a news or a sports reporter for KENW for 3 years, and then Michael and Dylan asked me like, hey, Jacob left, we need someone to do High School Spotlight, and I was like, oh yeah, sure, fine, easy, got it. And then they put me in front of the camera and have all these highlights, and it was a total shock. So I will never forget that, and I also will never forget how much I grew throughout watching each episode. So it was a very exciting experience.
And Michael, I'll ask you the same question. Takeaway moment from Sportslook for you?
There's just so many moments. It's been 4 years. There's just been a lot of moments, but I think actually traveling to all the different games and just hanging out with my now lifelong friends is just going to be good memories all around.
Brooklyn, from your career, we talked a little bit about this, but in case people missed the episode where we did, you had some definite ups and downs over your 4 years playing volleyball for Eastern. What was the high point?
I have two. I'd say beating WT back-to-back, my junior and my senior year, which hadn't been done in many years, was awesome. But beating Angelo State my senior year, like I told you before, we had a lot to prove my senior year. We lost a lot of phenomenal athletes my junior year. They were all seniors and they graduated. So to beat Angelo State, who was a top 10 team in Division II, was just so special. It was a huge confidence boost, and we walked away kind of feeling like we proved something to everyone.
Michael, in your years with Sportslook, you've seen some incredible highs on the high school level. You saw your alma mater win a state championship in football, but you've also seen Eastern teams do really well. What's your biggest high school moment? What's your biggest Eastern moment from your 4 years?
High school, it was seeing the Portales Rams take the state. That was just a fun game, seeing some of the kids that I knew. I watched them, they were freshmen, but it was still cool to see them succeed. And then for college, that wagon wheel game at WT, that was just, oh man, the energy there was crazy, and I'll never forget those kind of moments.
And Brooklyn, in terms of the jobs that you've done with Sportslook, you're obviously an on-air person from time to time. I remember back to an episode that we did where we looked at Title IX, and it really says a lot about our nation that female student athletes have a chance to have those great moments like Michael was just talking about. Yeah,
and kind of to add to that, it's so great, and I'm so thankful that I grew up knowing that I could play sports, and I had a father who there was no question I was going to be an athlete. And so I'm so thankful that there was so many people before me that made that possible. It was never a question like, oh, I wonder if I'll get to play. I wonder if my school will have it. I was a female, and I knew that if I wanted to be an athlete, I could be. And so I'm very thankful that I was given that opportunity.
Michael, during your 4 years in Sportslook, we've had two executive producers, Richard Rivera and now Ellen Crawford, learning opportunities from both of those individuals.
They both have very different teaching methods, and it's something that you can't really put your finger on exactly what it is, but I definitely took away a lot from both of them, and I'm going to take that into my future career, and hopefully I can spread some of that knowledge and skills to other people in my future.
Brooklyn, I had the opportunity to interview you on the radio earlier this week, and you were talking obviously about Alan and what an influence he's been, but you also talked about Professor Mr. Darrell, or Dr. Darrell, in the comm department, and what sort of a role did he play?
He made me enjoy going to class every day. And a lot of people think that he's just this goof, and he is. He's just a big goofball, but he is so knowledgeable. And so once you kind of peel back the humor that he has, and you kind of really start to dive into his notes and his PowerPoints and stuff, he has a lot to teach. And so I've learned so much from him. And he's only been here for 2 years, I think. So I wish he would have been here when I was a freshman. But there's a lot of professors in the comm department that have obviously helped me a lot. But I think Dr. Rowe and I both have the same kind of sense of humor. So I feel like we can kind of go back and forth.
Michael, I'll ask you the same question in terms of the other side of the comm building, as we say, the part that's not the broadcast side. Who in the comm department was the biggest influence on you?
Well, in the comm department, it's hard for me to say coming from like the DFM background. So really, in the comm department, Alan Crawford was the biggest influence for me.
How about DFM?
DFM, John Barr. John Barr has been he's the reason that I stuck through college at some points, and so I have a lot to thank him for.
In terms of every episode of Sportslook, obviously different in terms of the guests that we have, in terms of the high school spotlight. But if you have to say that there's one thing that's kind of run through your experience with Sportslook, what stayed the same every episode?
You always hit your mark right on, and we all think it's so crazy. We're all in the studio or in the control room, and for anyone watching, we give Doc 30 seconds or 12 minutes, and you are the only person that can hit 12 minutes on the dot. So that never changes, and we all make jokes about it, like, oh, he was 2 seconds off. We gotta do it again, you know. So I think that's something that's always been the same, and we also have a great time. And so that is just, Michael and I would have never became friends. We're two totally different majors in two totally different worlds, but this show's brought us together. So we've always had a great time, no matter what year we're in.
And Michael, I assume that you would echo that we've had people come, we've had people go, but I'd like to think we have kind of a happy ship here.
Oh, absolutely. Josh Bell and Gallagher, Jacob Aranda, those are going to be my friends for life, and I'll never forget them. And Dylan and Brooklyn, you build a kind of a family here, and I'm glad I have that.
Brooklyn, in the amount of time that we do have left, so that we hit our mark and we don't end up a minute earlier, 2 minutes late.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to young people that are watching this and are contemplating about a career in broadcast journalism, especially in sports?
Take chances. I have gotten the chance to go on the radio with you for baseball, and I wish I would have done that 3 years ago. You've always kind of asked, like, hey, are you interested? And finally, I got the guts to say yes. But take chances, get out of your comfort zone. I know nothing about baseball, and I get to do it with you on the radio, and I've learned so much. So my biggest thing was just get out of your comfort zone and know there's going to be people there that are going to support you, even if you don't do as well as you think you are. Michael,
any last thoughts to share on that subject?
On that, yeah, absolutely. If you're going to pursue this career, you gotta take chances. That was one of my biggest pet peeves in taking a teaching role. Here is when I would ask someone to do something, they would say, "Oh, I don't know how to do that." Like, well, you gotta learn somehow.
Exactly. Well, seriously, I joked a little bit about the fact that I'm happy and sad, and I really am. I'm happy that I got the chance to have you as part of Sportslook. Sad because you're leaving, but I know both of you on to bigger and better things. So thank you for being a part of the Sportslook experience.
Thank you, Doc. It was great.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that is going to wrap up our first interview segment, and we're going to have an interview with a couple of rising stars who are going to try to take the place of Brooklyn and Michael. So we'll clear this out, and we'll bring on our next two guests. Michael. Welcome back to Sportslook, and we bring to the set of Sportslook the future stars of Sportslook. We've got Dylan, we've got Lane, and guys, welcome to Sportslook.
Thanks, Doc. Thank you.
Well, Lane, from what I understand, this is your first time in front of a television camera.
Yes, it is. It's a little bit different from being in front of like film cameras, but I mean, it's just a camera, right?
Well, you can play a role. You can play a role of a guest on a TV program. How's that?
Yeah, I'll do that.
A little method acting?
Yeah, method acting, that's
Okay.
what we'll pull.
Okay. Well, Lane, what's the story? How did you get to Eastern New Mexico University? How did you get involved in Sportslook?
Well, I'm from Colorado. I'm from a really small town there, and I have a friend that was a year ahead of me. I graduated high school with him, and he lives in Elida, just right down the road, and he's got like a farm there and everything. And so he's how I heard about Eastern, and I came down here 2 years ago to play football, and I played wide out, and I was redshirted. You know, I was on scout team the whole time, and then I left because we run the triple option down here, and I was wide receiver, and I wanted the ball thrown to me. And I went to a school in Colorado last year, and I didn't play sports there. The coach didn't want me. He said all summer that I could go, but end of the summer came, and he said, we don't have a spot for you. So I focused on my film degree, and second semester came around, and I was like, well, this is what I want to do. I want to be a filmmaker. And so I came back down here because it's a way better film program.
And so kind of the same pattern as Michael Pointer, who's not technically a comm major, but is a digital filmmaker.
Yeah, so similar to him, he recruited me to the show. So
Excellent. And Dylan, of course, we've gotten to know you. You've done the high school spotlight. You've been our guest, but for people who may have missed the memo, what's your backstory?
So I'm originally from Portales, New Mexico, born and raised, and then I found my way to Sportslook through Michael and Jacob and a bunch of guys I used to go to high school with as well. And so that's where it started, and 3 years in, here I am.
And so obviously you've had on-camera exposure with the high school spotlight, but what other roles have you played in Sportslook?
So from top to bottom, pretty much, I've directed, I've technical directed, I've helped produce with Michael pretty much this whole semester. I've been in front of the camera, I've been behind the camera, I've edited. So pretty much anything you can name, I've done.
You'll have a pretty good portfolio when you leave here.
I hope so.
And Lane, how about you? What has been your involvement with Sportslook?
well, I'm new this year because I just came back this year. And last semester I volunteered, so I didn't really do much. I mostly ran studio cameras and jib and stuff. But this semester I was hired on, and so I've been doing more editing in the studio with the show, and I've been directing the last few shows, and I've been technical directing and kind of running stuff and trying to take over for Michael and Brooklyn and everybody. So.
What was the easiest thing about becoming a part of Sportslook? What's been the toughest thing about being a part of Sportslook?
I'd say the easiest thing is my filmmaking background is that I already knew a little bit about editing. I already knew how to operate Adobe Premiere, and I knew about cameras and how to operate them. And so it's been really easy to just kind of transition into this. The hardest thing is that it's TV, and I'm not really used to TV. And so like in the studio, like directing and stuff is like a little different. It's kind of crazy, but it's fun to do. It's definitely an experience, and it's an exciting one.
Yeah, I don't sit there and say, what's my motivation again? You know, like,
Yeah,
like most actors do.
I don't have to worry about any of that. It's just, this is what we're doing.
Dylan, I'll ask you the same question. What's been the easiest thing about becoming a part of Sportslook? What's been the toughest thing you've had to master?
So coming into Sportslook, unlike Lane, I had no experience editing anything. I had no experience with cameras. I had no idea anything I was going to be doing. When I got here, Michael really helped teach me how to use Premiere Pro and take over in the editing aspect, and then Jacob allowed me to technical direct and direct. And so those guys made the job easy for me. They were real patient, and they took the time to teach me the ways, and so I don't think I really had trouble learning anything too difficult because I had those guys in my corner.
Well, let me ask you a question about becoming a part of a high school spotlight and having actually some real significant time in front of a camera. What was your big adjustment there?
So it was writing a script. I used to make fun of Jacob and Christian because they'd always go over a little bit or under, and we'd have to fix the edit. And it can't be that hard. Well, when I finally took over with it, I realized that it's a lot harder than it looks. And then doing it alongside Brooklyn was difficult as well because she's so talented in her writing, and she's a lot more vocal than I am. And so like the first couple episodes, you could definitely tell that there was a different style between us, and hers was more professional than mine. But having to adjust to her level, and then hopefully I was able to do that throughout the semester, or the semesters.
Well, I told you a couple of weeks ago that the high school spotlight you'd done had been your best work, so clearly you got better. And you know, it says a lot to Brooklyn is that she could have tried to make you look bad, but you know, she seemed like she was a good team player.
Yeah, she definitely was. Being able to look at her scripts when she wasn't there and read and adjust to how she wrote things, and then I could definitely tell in football a lot that our scripts became a lot more similar. And then baseball, we only had one episode, but in basketball as well, they started to fuse together. At the beginning, when we first started, you could tell that there was a big difference, but then they kind of adjusted together, and it made for a better show.
Lane, in terms of filmmaking, what type of film do you want to make? Are you more of a short subject, or are you thinking more like 2-hour films like Christopher Nolan? Or
Well, the goal eventually would be director feature films to do. That's like the thing. You want to get to the top. You don't want to be, one of the bottom guys. You want to be top tier. So that would be the goal one day, but you got to get started somewhere. And so I start out making short films, making my own little stuff, like doing my own independent things until I make it, because it's, this industry is tough to make it into. It's a difficult industry to get into. Everybody wants to get in there, and there's just so many people. It's so competitive that it's hard to get in some places. So I'm gonna have to work for free for a while, and I'm gonna have to just pick up things off the ground and pick up trash and mop floors. And but the goal is director. So.
Well, I would think that having the fact that you were a guest on Sportslook on your resume would put you up, on the ladder.
Yeah, I would hope that this gets me somewhere, right?
I've asked Michael Pointer this question before, so I'll ask you. In terms of a director that you'd like someday to be compared to, who would that director be?
Man, that's a tough question.
I asked the tough
I know,
questions on Sportslook.
I know Michael said Edgar Wright because he loves Edgar Wright. Edgar Wright's a great director. Baby Driver is a fantastic movie. All his movies are great. He just has his own style. But for me, I think that Stanley Kubrick, he's just one of the greats. He's been my favorite. 2001: A Space Odyssey was the reason I wanted to become a filmmaker. I watched it and I was like, I have no idea what this movie means. I want to learn. I want to learn about this. And I've always loved movies. I've always loved watching them. And as soon as I saw 2001, I came to film school and I watched it again and I learned all these things and I still don't know what it means, but I'm excited to learn someday, right?
Lane, little trivia for you. 50 years ago this week, that premiered.
Wow, no way?
No.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Doc Elder is useful for something.
Yeah, just like all the facts.
Not any of them useful, but kind of interesting. Dylan, let's flip the switch a little bit and talk about sports broadcasting, which obviously is the career that you're heading into right now. If there was a sportscaster that you would like to be compared to someday, who would that be?
Well, you like to say Stephen A. Smith, of course. I don't have the same amount of energy as him, but just how knowledgeable he is and how energetic he is in everything that he does. He gives it 100%. Skip Bayless as well. He's up there. He's not as energetic as Stephen A. Smith. When they were on the same show together, you could tell that they bumped heads because they had different personalities. But they're so knowledgeable about what they're talking about, and in every sport, in that matter.
Well, here's a little trivia. I laid some trivia on Lane here. I was the interim chair of the comm department about a decade ago, and I had recommended that we hire a new professor from Winston-Salem College, North Carolina. He was Stephen A. Smith's mentor at Winston-Salem. And the university didn't go with my idea. It's like, what? So you could have actually, one of those great what ifs.
What if? That would have been incredible.
You could have been the dream, man.
Exactly. You could have been the next Stephen A. So, Dylan, over the years that you've been involved so far, and obviously the reason we have you guys on is because you are going to be the future of Sportslook, but to this point, what's been your favorite sports moment that you've been able to have a hand in broadcasting, either in terms of sportcasting or in terms of broadcasting on the radio?
Okay, since you said TV and radio, I'll go ahead and give you 2 moments. The first one's going to have to be the state football game in 2016. It wasn't with you or Paul. It was with Mr. Chandler, but to have the opportunity to broadcast my alma mater in a state championship game and then watching them go on to win it was an incredible feeling. And then the state basketball tournament in itself for TV, that just stands apart from anything else I've really done. It's extremely stressful. It's a lot of work, but the satisfaction at the end of it is very rewarding.
Lane, in terms of your experience, from Colorado, you didn't grow up in the eastern environment like Dylan did. So your perspective would be interesting. What, in the year that you were here and now the year that you're back, what moment stands out for you?
I'd have to say that the biggest difference between Colorado and here, and definitely the Lone Star Conference itself, was the WT game, the wagon wheel. That's just an experience to go to. It's an experience to live, and we won this year, and so go Hounds. We took home the wheel. That's really exciting. It was exciting to see all the boys run up on the hill and hold the wheel up, and we got to run up there with the camera and film everybody. So that was pretty cool. And I mean, I'm new to this, so it's really only been a year, so that's really the extent of it. But I mean, just going to the WT game and seeing that was just a lot of fun.
In terms of moving forward with Sportslook, what is the one thing that you hope will be the same from this year to next year? If there's a little tweak that you could make, what would you like to see us do next year?
Wow, that is a tough question. Probably keep Michael here so that I don't have to keep the workload. That would be pretty cool. He could just get hired on here instead of going to Albuquerque. But I don't know. I really haven't been a part of like the TV game long and known a lot about it. This is like my first experience in this world and knowing anything about it. Like the most I've known about it is seeing like movies about broadcasting TV. So like things like The Journalist and other things like that. And this was just a new experience. It was a lot of fun to experience, and I think that the wheels crank well here. I mean, I'm sure there's some things that can be tweaked, but as of right now, I don't know what they are.
Okay, Dylan asked you the same question. What do you hope we continue? What would you like to see maybe tweaked a little bit?
Well, I hope we can continue to run the show so smoothly. Alan's an extremely busy man, and Michael really filled his shoes when we needed him. Michael fixed all of our problems when we had him when Alan wasn't there. Something that I'd like to see different was maybe a new set. The set's been the same for about since the 90s, and so it'd be something cool to leave behind. My senior year would have a new set.
That is a great idea. And see, that's why I love young people, because you're creative. You think outside of the box. I just show up and it's like, oh, okay, that's the way it's always been. Okay, so let's make a goal. Let's see if we can make that happen before next year.
All right, I say
We'll
do
see
it.
what we can do.
All right. Well, Lane, Dylan, thanks so much, and let's keep the high tradition that Brooklyn and Michael and the people who went before then established.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, that is going to wrap up an interview segment of Sportslook. So what we'll do is we'll clear the set, and I'll finish up with one final overtime for the semester right now. Phil Claybaugh used to be the baseball coach at Eastern New Mexico University, and he would coach from the third base coaching box. When a guy up at bat had 2 strikes on him, Phil Claybaugh would say, foul off the nasty and hit on the good one. Well, if he had been coaching a game for the San Francisco Giants earlier this week when Brandon Belt was up to bat, he would have had to say that phrase 16 times in a row, because Brandon Belt set a major league record fouling off 16 straight pitches before he found one that he could really drive. And he did, but unfortunately right into the glove of the right fielder. Well, that has been an overtime, and that will wrap up Sportslook for this semester. I'd like to thank my guests. I'd like to thank our graduating seniors, Brooklyn and Michael. I'd like to thank our rising stars, Dylan and Lane. I had a floor crew led by Mr. Dijon today. So for those aforementioned people, one last time, this is Doc Elder saying, so long. Well, Lane, as I understand, this is your first time in front. We're off to such a good start.
I know.
Good, so far, let's do that. Method acting, as we would say.
Yeah.
Darn it.